Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today in this video I am going to give introduction of classical poetry. I'll be discussing the characteristic features of classical poetry, genres of poetry as well. Okay, so let's begin with classical poetry. So what do you understand by the word classic? Classic is something that refers to old. Okay, something that is old. Classical music, you listen to them, old music. So classic refers to tradition, culture, ancient Greek origin, something that is conventional and long established standard. So it refers to 13th to 17th century literature. It's a legacy left behind by the writer, authors, poets of that age. And we can critically analyze poetry or any piece of literature. So in this manner analysis, the breakdown of whole into components and analyze each component by categorizing it, by giving it degrees and smaller parts, dividing it. Okay, and then poetry. What is poetry? The definition of poetry varies from person to person. You can define poetry in your own words, the spontaneous flow of emotion, or you can say playful expression of words. Wordplay, it's a wordplay, you can say play with words, or you can say express emotions so that are powerful and it creates an impact on reader. Yes, of course, words, poetry especially have such power to create or to bring change or transformation in the life of a person. After reading this subject of classical poetry, you may be seem to be influenced by those poetry. Okay, it create an impact in your life such as mine did. I personally experienced it. And let come to, yes, the purpose. What is the purpose of poetry? The purpose of poetry is to entertain, to give pleasure to the audience. Okay, and poetry is something that is a leisure activity. It's a hobby, a passion, you can say. As you study the major writers, authors, you can see that poetry, it's something that is their leisure activity, and they are associated with some other occupations. William Shakespeare, he was an actor, artist, dramatist. Okay, and other writers, some of them are professionally pharmacists or many more. Okay, professions they have. And let's move on to the features and characteristics of classical poetry. So features, we'll discuss that all the poetry of the Greek. So classical poetry is the poetry of Greek and Roman. That is called classic. Classical writers tend to focus on social issues, and romantic writing prefer free rhyming. Okay, poetry, yes, that is written in prose form, not in prose, sorry, but in verse form. Poetry is written in verse. Okay, and rhyming is there, yes, in poetry. The next characteristic is the concentration. Okay, it refers to the hold of one idea, I mean focus on one idea or the line of arguments. Concentration is known in many classical poets such as Homer, Chaucer, Pope, and John Donne. Many more focus on the idea or the point of view. Second characteristic or feature is the extension of epigrams. Epigrams, you know that some pithy statements, short statements that contain a wisdom. Yes, they are aphorism, like you can say wise saying. So verses, poetry written in verses are enforcing the sense of the theme. And third one is the conceit. So conceit, what is conceit? It is the simile, or the, you can say, comparison between two dissimilar things, and the reader is fully conscious of it even while having to conceit the likeness implied by the poet. Fourth characteristic is the wit. Wit is something you say of wisdom. Okay, wit, something witty. Wit is wisdom. So wit displays the logical underlining meaning. not the physical meaning but the underlying meaning within classical poetry is subtle and striking. And next characteristic or feature is the combination of passion and thought. And there is unification of sensibility, showing intellectual analysis of the emotion, arguments, and reasoning balances the passion, blending of emotions. And next characteristic, tone of classical poetry, and it is the blend of love, emotion, intellectual, and its style. Okay, use next characteristic, use of colloquial speech. The content and style is verbose in poetry. Verbose, something that is exaggerated. Use of hyperbole and long sentences are used to describe smaller things. Okay. Next characteristic is realism. You also are familiar with that concept. Realism, something that is real picture of something. It means the portrayal of truth of life. As a poet, he sees it, and most of the classical poetry is full of allegories. But Chaucer has marked realism in his Canterbury Tales. Yes, we'll study his Canterbury Tales. I'll make separate video on that as well. Prologue to Canterbury Tales. And so keep connected with my channel for upcoming videos. I'll be discussing all the things or the concept that content that you study in classical poetry. It's a picture of real life of the 14th century and the Canterbury Tales. Okay, then chivalry is there, stories of heroes, knights, and then next feature is highlighting the social, moral, ethical, and political issues covering the 17th and 18th century. And then comes the allegory. It is the term used for the description with the two meanings. Okay, one is the apparent meaning and other is the underlying, concealed, or hidden meaning, you can say. Okay, and yes, use of figures. Classical poets first sees the imaginative what they describe, use poetical images to astonish and startle the readers. The mood, yes, the mood is there. The feature characteristic in a poetry, it refers to atmosphere that is prevalent in a poem. Mood invokes certain feelings and emotions in the reader, and some poems have atmosphere of peace while others invoke the feeling of fear, thriller, crime, etc. Okay, genres of poetry. We'll discussing types and genres of poetry. Okay, so there are many genres or types of poetry. Okay, so all these can be categorized into three major categories. They come under these three major categories. Narrative, first one is the narrative, and the subcategories or the subgenres come under these categories: epic, ballad, monologue, tale, metrical, romance, and then lyrical, which include elegy or sonnet, ballad, and dramatic poetry, which include tragedies, comedies, tragic comedies, close drama, and mask. Okay, so we'll see that. Okay, the first, narrative poetry. It tells a story. Narration means telling a story. It tells a story with a plot, characters, setting. Okay, it's lofty form, and which deals with the epics. Yes, epics deal with god, demons, heroes, spirits, and a long narrative poem. For example, John Milton's Paradise Lost. It's an epic poem. Okay, you'll study it in your course as well. And then come the lyrical poetry. So lyric comes from Latin word lyricus, which mean something of melodious or for the lyric. These are short poems that are originally accompanied by music. Okay, musical, melodious, or lyric poetry, emotional, as I already said. And a lyrical poem is usually written in the first person and it expresses personal emotions and thoughts. And then dramatic poetry, two great classes of tragedy and comedy are there. So yes, they come under play parts, tragedy, comedy, and supplemented by the mirror varieties of morality plays, miracle plays, mystery plays, and it tells a story using characters' own thought or spoken statement. Now we'll discuss the subgenres of poetry. Okay, there is no need to discuss them in detail, just you will definition is enough. Allegory is a narrative with two levels of meaning. One is stated meaning, that is something that is expressed, and second one is hidden, concealed, or unstated meaning. Okay, and then Aubad is a song or poem greeting the sunrise, traditionally a lover's lament that the night's passion must come to end. Ballad. Ballad, broadly speaking, ballad is the genre of folk poetry, usually an orally transmitted narrative song, and it implies to serve other kinds of poetry. Okay, and then Cento, a poem which composed entirely of lines from other poems, and Dirge is a funeral song and dramatic monologue. And this can also be called a closet soliloquy or a long poem spoken by a character who often unwittingly reveals his or her hidden desires. Okay, the example is Robert Browning was the master of this genre. And then elegy, you can, yes, you are familiar with that, I think so. It's a type of poem poetry general. In elegic form, it is written who for the person who is dead, to lament his death or to mourn for his death. Okay, so to express your sadness. And then epic is a long narrative poem that catalogs and celebrates heroic and historical deeds. Focus on single heroic individual. The focus is on single heroic individual, the protagonist. The first epic in English literature is Beowulf. Yeah, okay. And other epics are in your syllabus that you will study: The Paradise Lost and Rape of the Lock. And epigrams are brief and pithy aphoristic observation, often satirical. And then epitaph refers to tombstone inscriptions, several famous poems, and with the poet writing his own, for example Thomas Gray's Elegy in a country churchyard. And then Epithalamion, a song of or a poem that celebrates a wedding. And then Fable, a brief tale talking where the characters are animals, talking animals. Okay, usually having a moral values, and didactic in purpose to convey a moral or a message. Okay, you study about the Gulliver's Travel. Okay, where the animals play as a character, they can talk. In many fiction include fables, animals as a character. And then hymn is a song of praise. Okay, in the praise of anything, a person. And then lyrical emphasize a large portion of world poetry. Okay, lyrical are brief poems that emphasize musical qualities, they're melodious, emotional. And then or is a long series of meditation on an elevated subject. Okay, and it can take one of these three forms of art. And then parody is a comical imitation. And then satire mean ridicule or to mock something, ridicule of some kind, usually passing moral judgments. And so these are some genres of poetry. So that's all introduction. I'll provide you notes in the description as well, and I'll discuss other topics, so keep connected with my channel. So thank you.